Rolling. So I am Addie Fracchia. I am originally from the Hudson Valley. I live in Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn, and I'm a chef. Right now, I'm a private chef, and as wonderful as it is to be a private chef, I used to be, running multi-million dollar restaurants in the city, and now I essentially cut apples for children. So I wanted a project that stimulated my brain in a way and also provided something more for the world. And so now I just started a granola company. Okay, so I have this whole thing about how we do breakfast in this country is sort of bullshit. Or rather, it's just like not on the right track. So, like brunch, for instance, first off, it's just a giant excuse to booze during the day. But really, it's either like way too fatty or way too sugary. It's not really, doesn't really give you a ton of nutrients. And so I sort of believe in healthy, savory, and sweet, and sort of, wholesome. So this granola has a mixture of seeds and nuts and some dried fruits, and it's just sort of, in my opinion, it's the perfect balance of savory and sweet, while also being generally good for you. Every order you make as a chef, you make a choice. And a lot of it has to do with, what is your bottom line? And there's a strong pressure, especially on the person who's ordering, to cut costs or to make it as efficient as possible. You end up buying the ingredient that is 5% cheaper, but ends up coming from, it's frozen seafood from Thailand as opposed to, fresh caught in America type things. And it's like pretty soul crushing. Because you can just sort of like go down that rabbit hole without really realizing what's happening. And then eventually you're sort of like looking at your product and you're like, this is just not the thing that I sort of believe in. And I would say I sort of got my cooking chops at a restaurant that's around the corner from here. I actually just walked by there, sort of like out of nostalgia and killing time because I'm always a wildly early person, which is Gramercy Tavern. And Tom Colicchio and Danny Meyer started that restaurant like 30, I think, years ago at this point, and now it's being run by Mike Anthony, who has been there for over 20 years. But that restaurant really has put a huge emphasis on buying like sustainably and buying from the green market and buying from local farmers, and that made a huge impression on me, which is part of why the granola that I'm making is only being sold at organic, sustainable farms throughout right now. I mean, we just started, by we, it's really me. I just started doing this about like a few weeks ago, to be honest. It's a baby. So who knows where it will go, but selling it at places that have those values and are also, growing the vegetables either right there or partnering with the bread makers who are down the street who are buying their grain, just like all of that cycle, seeing that, not only can you taste it, but it just sort of, it fills my spirit in a way that like is sort of hard to articulate, but when it's missing. And I mean, look, like I'm making granola, right? So like I am using hazelnuts, I am using sesame seeds, almonds. A lot of those things aren't being grown, in Brookville, which is where this is baked. But I am sourcing from places that are, that check every single box down the line in terms of sustainability and organic that anyone would look for, and that's pretty important to me. What makes the biggest difference? For me, buying seasonally is incredibly important, which means, get an idea of what's coming out of the ground. And usually when it's coming out of the ground, wherever you're purchasing your ingredients, as long as it's not sort of a massive conglomerate, we'll be buying those ingredients local because it's more cost effective for them as well. That means going to the green market and seeing what's there. It's also a really easy Google, and it's also that the same can be said for meat and seafood. A lot of people don't think that meat is part of that, but it is. Meat has cycles as well. Like if you think about lamb in the spring. So I would start there. I would say that the term natural is bullshit. And I feel like most people know that, but maybe you don't. Like if it tastes sweet, it's got sugar in it, whether it says it does or doesn't. It's got artificial crap, and you want to pay attention to what you're putting into your body just from a mind health perspective, not necessarily from a caloric one unless you're paying attention to that. But just if something says it's not sweet and you can taste it, then you know that it's being highly processed. And that's something to keep in mind. And the last thing I will say is, and I am biased, but I firmly believe in eating real food, which I know sounds pretentious and I don't mean it to be, but I mean, like, have a little bit of butter, have the whole milk. It's not going to ruin your day. It's funny because I stopped working in restaurants because I needed to slow down. And then I slowed down my life. I've sort of reached the point where it's like, okay, now we've taken the time to smell the flowers, if you will. Let's look around and see what else we can build and we can do. I get embarrassed, or I shy away from the idea that chefs are artists. Chefs certainly are artists. I don't see myself as an artist. I see myself as more of a drill sergeant. But when the thing that you dedicate your life to doing doesn't bring you joy anymore, it's time to take a step back. And in the moment, it felt just like, well, this is what I have to do. Now, looking back on it, I'm quite proud of myself for making that decision. I'm mad that as I get older, I feel like for some reason, when I was younger, I was much more like, oh, well, I know what I'm doing and I'm fine and everything's cool. And as I'm getting older, it's like, well, I know nothing. I don't know anything about what I'm doing. And I have crippling anxiety. So why, as we get older, I feel like it should go this way, but it goes this way. And that's fucking infuriating. And I mean, that's probably the biggest one. Otherwise, I'm just going to rant about politics and no one needs to hear that. What's your favorite part of your granola? My favorite's definitely the hazelnuts, for sure. It's tied between I just switched out the sour cherries that we're using and they're apple juice infused sour cherries, and those are really delicious. But when I catch myself when I'm scooping granola for myself, and I eat half a cup of it every single day, I'll pick out. Honestly, I could talk about it for a long time. The hazelnuts are personal favorite, but it's also the coconut chips get really dark and crispy and covered in brown sugar and are delicious and toasted in olive oil. I think, Sarah, your favorite part is the sesame seeds, which sort of like, I feel like every Bon Appetit recipe that they're like trying to reinvent classics these days is using like tahini for sort of no real clear reason, but that brings in sort of like, I mean, I guess the reason is what I'm about to say. It brings in that like umami undercurrent flavor. I just love it. And the thing is like I wanted to create something that was not only delicious and yummy and would give me a project in my brain, but would also be shelf stable and not just sort of like me making food that would then be thrown away, because that was like incredibly infuriating as a private chef to just like make all this food for people and then just have to get rid of it, because you can't, the way to donate food in this country is not really efficient. So having a shelf stable product that I think is delicious and speaks for itself is something that I'm proud of.
Can't wait to taste it.
Yeah.